Welcome to the Overrated Experience Sports and Sports Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Blondin, and we are back. Season 3 smells of football season. Football kickoff is a matter of weeks away from the amazing time we have between the fall and the beginning or mid-February to the end of the Super Bowl. Jam-packed with football action to bet on. I can't be more excited. We have NCAA football kicking off this Saturday. A lot of games, there will be starting off the college football season. And then the NFL kicks off with Eagles, Cowboys in a week Thursday. It is the Overrated Experience Sports and Sports Betting Podcast. If you haven't joined us before, this is a sports podcast that talks about sports betting from a common person perspective. You know, we talk about the ups and downs, the wins, the losses, the trials and tribulations of everything to do with sports gambling from a common person's perspective. I am like you. I get caught up in the emotion of the game. I get caught up in the anger of trying to chase a loss. And I try to share that here. And we talk through how it's going in the sports world. And you can follow us on X at Overrated EXPER2. That's Overrated EXPER2. And also Instagram and Facebook at Overrated Experience. You'll find us there. Please join us. Hit us up. Let us know that you're joining because you listen to the podcast. But today's podcast will be one of many in the fall that aims our focus on football. And before we get into the sports betting of the NFL, and eventually other sports as the winter joins us reluctantly, we're going to talk about, this is more of a special presentation by the Overrated Experience to review. If you haven't checked it out yet, to review, by the title, you'll probably see it, is Netflix's series, SEC Football, Any Given Saturday. So this is a 7-episode look at the world of college football and really focuses on the Southeastern Conference, the SEC, which makes up a part of the NCAA football program. These are the schools that you're very familiar with, the ones that tend to generate a lot of NFL talent. So if you heard of LSU as an example, Jaden Daniels, superstar quarterback for the Commanders coming off his rookie season. He just came out of LSU. You know, and other guys like Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins, Alabama, Crimson Tide. Back in the day, Auburn, part of SEC, Cam Newton. But also Joe Burrow, LSU, led LSU to a national championship. Well-known, obviously, Cincinnati Bengal quarterback. So this is a 7-episode series that focuses on a handful of those SEC schools. And I'm going to review those episodes, touch upon it. So spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the series, maybe you want to put a pause on the podcast, hold it off until you've taken a look at the series on Netflix. And I want to explain, first of all, what would motivate? What are you getting into? What's the reasons why we would watch, this series of college football, and who is it aimed at? Well, what I'll tell you is, with the success Netflix has had with, let's say, the F1 series, where we're not into car racing, F1 car racing, you probably, if you sat down and watched the F1 series and its multiple seasons, it does get you really jacked up to kind of follow along. You start recognizing driver names, storylines within the season, within the teams, amongst the executives on the teams. That's kind of what this is meant to do, is to draw you in. I don't know. Let's say from my perspective, I am a college football fan. I'm a college football sports bettor, but there is a level of fan when it comes to college football, and especially the SEC, where I'm wondering what their perspective is on this series, because they are already bought and sold on college football and everything that has to do with their school they support. They are all in. This series works out for a guy like me who's on the fringes of trying to understand, the narratives and the storylines, the history, and some of the things that these guys are battling for and what the experience is like in the college ranks before many of them turn out to be NFL prospects. And some of them peak, and that's it. Football life is over from the college ranks. So it attracts me to come watch this series, and I have watched the series and enjoyed it a lot, and it's changed my perspective, which I'll share with you. What are you going to notice when you watch? And, I'm going to go through some of the storylines here that you're going to see and hear about when you watch the series. The things that stood out to me, and especially being the SEC, is the massive length that these schools go to make these programs successful. You will notice the practice facilities, the weight rooms. Like, it's insane. Every SEC school that I recall in this series has a state-of-the-art indoor practice facility, multiple practice facilities, ridiculous locker rooms that we're talking NFL level, right? If you don't understand the level of love that goes into NCAA football, college football, especially the SEC, you'll get it here. You'll see it. You'll see that some of these programs are bigger to many fans across the United States than the NFL is. They live and die based on their school, how they do each season. And some of the focal points are obviously these programs are head coach related. So every time, for the most part, not every school they touched upon in this series, and it wasn't all schools in SEC, by the way, the head coach was kind of the main character. What was the head coach's situation? What were their thoughts? How did they react to a win? How did they react to a loss? How did they react to the end of the season? All came down to the head coach with a sprinkle in of many of the players. But again, the focal point and a lot of this that is college football is surrounded by the head coach and how successful and the pressure that there is to succeed and win trophies. Also, you'll notice, and I talked about the size and popularity, that many of these programs on game day are coming, their buses are coming in to basically a parade of hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe that's overdoing it, maybe not, maybe I'm understating it. But these fans in these communities know who you are, and if you're on the opposite side of the fan base, they know who to boo. So there's a lot of pressure there. And these fans will show up for anything team related. So many of the scenes in the show are coaches heading to restaurants, looking at talking to local radio stations about their hopes and dreams, and some of the questions they're answering related to how the season, or they expect the season to go. And some of the key position battles they have leading into the season. So we'll touch on that. So a lot of interesting stuff. If you are not familiar with the college program that is NCAA football, SEC specific, take a look at this series. Seven episodes that I find very interesting. You'll get to understand some of the key rivalries. Now, one of the appealing things about European football, when I mean European football is soccer, is that many of the diehard fans of a lot of these teams in Europe, they may never taste a Champions League victory. They may never chase a Premier League championship. They may settle for a good run in the FA Cup, a good run in the second or first division below the Premiership. And those are the same kind of things that happen across Italy, Germany, Spain, France, etc. It has that same feel to it, where if you're having a tough season, that one win over your state rival or your long-term rival could go a long way of kind of curing some of the feelings your fan base has on maybe your lackluster season. So you get to learn a lot about that, and we'll touch upon that. You also look at not much footage about these guys going to class. So I guess let's not kid ourselves that business in the SEC is football. So you got footage of guys walking on campus, but I don't recall, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I've seen one footage of a guy studying for a test. a big test that may make or break his availability or eligibility into that next game. I didn't see none of that. So that was interesting. You'll find that interesting. Now maybe I'll talk about at the end here what I probably wanted more to see, and maybe it's unrealistic or what I'm going to ask, and what maybe going forward, I got to believe there's going to be a season 2, what I want to see for that next season going into next year. Now, just to get you a heads up for your folks out there unfamiliar with what the SEC is, it is the Southeastern Conference that was established in 1932. There are 16 teams in the Southeastern Conference, and they participate in the NCAA Division I program. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with NCAA. And there are 16 teams in the SEC, and it was originally 14 last couple of years, but it expanded by 2 more, Oklahoma and Texas. And you're going to find these teams predominantly in the South Central and Southeastern United States. And you'll be blown away by the size of these programs and what you see in these episodes. So it kicks off episode 1, obviously with an opening kind of trailer, kind of opening where it's kind of touching upon everything you're going to see in the upcoming season. So some of the teams you're going to look at, predominantly it was early on LSU, Florida a little bit, South Carolina, the Gamecocks get a lot of time. So Coach Shane Beamer gets a lot of time, and they're kind of spread out through the whole experience. The Texas A&M tends to be at the tail end when it comes to the focal point there. The Mississippi State Bulldogs, again, tail end. Kentucky Wildcats, very minimal. And I'm trying to figure out what value there was bringing the Kentucky Wildcats into this series instead of spending more time in other places. Vanderbilt Commodores, one of the programs that's up and rising and kind of the whipping horse of the SEC. Really, until the last few years under head coach Clark Lee, a laughingstock. Let's just put it out there. Vanderbilt was considered a joke when it, comparison to the Alabamas, Texases, and Tennessees. There's a lot of focus on Vanderbilt. Tennessee near the end, a little focus on Tennessee. The Auburn Tigers, not much at all. Very, very little. The Arkansas Razorbacks, maybe the smallest. Maybe I'm debating, did Kentucky get less or Arkansas get less? And that's pretty much it. I'll talk about what I want to see in season 2, but there are some big teams that are left off. You'll see some of these teams play those teams, like the Alabamas and Texases, but you didn't get an inside look. So episode 1, as I stated, talks about what you're going to see throughout the year, but it really kicks off with 2 schools, LSU and Brian Kelly, their head coach, talking about, shows him, having dinner, talking to some of the boosters, really getting prepped for the season, and it really focuses on what the program and LSU is all about. The expectations are absolutely enormous, that you cannot lose too many games at LSU before it's deemed a failing season. And you can tell, like, Brian Kelly's, has a good regard as a good head coach. He came from Notre Dame a few years back. However, I think his reputation so far is that he's underwhelmed with success. I mean, he's developed NFL players and talent. Jaden Daniels I talked about, he coached up, and he's, second overall pick in the NFL. Malik Neighbors, NFL, Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Those are just a few names that he's been a part of the success for LSU. But I think right now the pressure is mounting on him to create a program that is a national champion. So we look at their preparation. You hear him on the practice field that he wants to simulate, go at real speed. He's a hard ass on his players. And they're getting ready for their first kickoff in Las Vegas to take on USC. And it follows their preparation. We go down, we go to Las Vegas, and, just Allegiant Stadium in Vegas, packed, right? It's massive. And they take on the USC Trojans, but they come out with a loss. Some key mistakes. Not a good start for LSU. Not a good, beginning for a team that's expected to compete for a national title. So that was a setback for LSU. And you'll notice a lot of the trends here are the coaches are challenge their players ahead of time. Make sure that this game you're playing is the be all end all, like your life is on the line. And if something goes wrong, at least if the cameras are there, I don't know if it's just because the cameras are there, but we'll put the losses on themselves. Right, so they tend to, if they didn't execute, they'll put the weight on their shoulders and say it's my fault. I didn't have you ready. But I honestly, I don't think they fucking believe that one bit. They're thinking transfer portal. How do I exchange, get rid of? How do I move on from so and so that can't come through in the clutch? I got to believe that's what they're thinking. So that's kind of where LSU kicked off. So big hype, underwhelming opening kickoff. Now they already have a loss. South Carolina Gamecocks. It goes into Shane Beamer's background, as his father was a longtime coach of Virginia Tech, and him trying to establish his own his legacy here at South Carolina. And you can kind of get a feeling that he's been around long enough at South Carolina that people want results, and he's really kind of on the hot seat. It could teeter either way of where the season's going to go. But you can definitely feel the pressure. There's clips of his wife saying, hey, when we lose, I do not want to leave the house because I feel that the whole town is blaming me. And that is absolutely probably what happens, in a community like South Carolina with the pressure. And, even Coach Beamer's talking about his kids. He feels bad for them. They got to go to school, and they probably feel the heat from classmates and people that are, just probably on their ass about, the team's performance that following Saturday. So that's the interesting part in episode 1. You get to know Lenora Sellers, which is one of the big time quarterbacks in college football, and his development, and kind of like, their success banks on how well he is developing. And I can't remember if it's the first episode where, he gets banged up a little bit, and they start to struggle in South Carolina, don't get the wins that they want. But, there's more to come on them. Again, a lot of the focus of the series is on the South Carolina Gamecocks. We moved to episode 2, QB1. That's the title. By the way, opening kickoff was episode 1 title. Florida stands out to me here. Florida is more of the focal point in this one. So Florida, the Gators, big time program. You'll remember Florida with Tim Tebow and other players in there, Rex Grossman. And, one of the beginning footage you see is, like, I think he's a 6-year pro, Graham Mertz, quarterback for the Florida Gators, is taking promotional shots with Tim Tebow and other Florida in past quarterbacks. So the pressure's on because they get kickoff against the Miami Hurricanes. And, they really show the story that DJ Legway, who is the number 1 rated prospect coming out of high school that joined the Gators, and is kind of, when is his time coming? When is he going to fit into the program? And the pressure being under Billy Napier, head coach of the Florida Gators, is everybody knows he's the future. He's the next few years, and he's going to get the reins. When are you going to pull the trigger? Right? So that is the story in Florida. And you kind of learn about DJ Legway that I think he is thinking, I need more snaps. I think I deserve more reps. But when he gets the ball, and he eventually does because of an injury, season-ending injury to Graham Mertz, you could see that, oh shit. Like, I'm kind of feeling overwhelmed now. Like, I'm the guy. So that was an interesting storyline of, a top prospect coming to a program. He's a freshman, and, things are thrown on him, and he's kind of got to learn on the fly. And how Billy Napier handles that quarterback, because there originally was a quarterback, sharing duties there before the injury. So Billy Napier, you hear, Billy, after the loss against Miami, Billy Napier getting ripped by his fans. You're a bum, Billy, you're a bum. I mean, he's got to live with, those losses. Wins and losses are like death. You lose, you suck. What's the famous saying that John F. Kennedy talked about is failure is an orphan, and success has a million fathers. That's exactly the life of a SEC head coach and that was displayed in episode 2. Episode 3 shocked the world. This is where we get into more focus and insight on the Vanderbilt Commodores and Clark Lee, few seasons in, using Diego Pineda, quarterback, and their journey to bring this program to respectability. Clark Lee is he's from the school as a player, really has a lot of invested to bring this program to respectability. And it's really a kickoff to the start of that story of, how do they become respectable? How do they earn some, street cred in the SEC instead of being the doormats they're thought of? And the work ethic by quarterback Pineda. They show him, he's getting up early, doing like just ridiculous workouts, 5 a.m. or whatever it is, and every day. So he's a bulldog. He's a gamer. He's a small guy. He's a really, I don't think he's a prototypical NFL quarterback to say, but really a guy you'd go to battle with, and he goes to battle for sure. And then episode 3, it focuses on Arkansas and Tennessee kind of quickly. So the story of this, episode is 2 upsets in one weekend. Now, before I get to Vanderbilt, Arkansas goes in, upsets Tennessee 19-14. That's really kind of what you see of Arkansas. We come back to Tennessee later, but it's, to me, superseded. And the story in this episode could have probably predominantly focused on Vanderbilt hosting the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think they showed some ridiculous stat of the last time Vanderbilt knocked them off was like just some sort of ridiculous. I should have wrote it down. It was 30 years ago, maybe it's longer. But it just, the thought is this is never going to happen. They're never going to be in the same ballpark. They were a 20-something point underdog against the Alabama Crimson Tide. You got the footage of former Alabama coach Nick Saban saying something derogatory about Vanderbilt, and they're playing that. Clark Lee's getting them all pumped up. I mean, they're ready to go, and they go out and win. They go out and win. They beat the number one team in the country at that time. The scene is like just chaos as the Vanderbilt fans rush the field. Like, it's just people everywhere. They rip down the goalposts. The party's going. They're dragging the goalpost down the street in Nashville, throw it into the river. And, anything that Coach Lee has done now is justified, right? He's got the belief that if we're knocking off Alabama, the number one team in the country, we might get to the point where we're eligible for a bowl game, which they needed 6 wins to be eligible for a bowl win, and they haven't done it, I think 2013 or something like that, whatever, a lengthy period of time before Vanderbilt played in a bowl game. So that was ridiculous and like chaotic, and that's what college football is all about. Is that win against Alabama may not be a national championship, but that is everything to that team. That is everything to that program to even build credibility for new recruits coming in or transfers from the transfer portal, which is becoming more of a factor in NCAA college football. But just a big win, and that win will go down in history for this program. Pineda, the quarterback, will be forever a legend. That time you beat Alabama here at home. This is where legends are made. You're never going to see Vanderbilt as a national champion, probably not at least. But that game tells you everything you need to know about that season. That is everything to them. And then we get to episode 4, Turning Point. And this is where we see LSU in a situation where they got to beat Alabama to kind of keep their college football playoff hopes alive. And I'll get to that in a bit. And so they go into Alabama, must win, and they falter. They can't beat Alabama. Alabama's way too much. And you find that, at this point, LSU, they're in a quandary, right? They're in a quandary here after that loss. Is the odds are that, they're not going to be placed into they're not going to win an SEC championship. They're not going to make the college football playoff. And I talked about earlier that this program is built around sending a lot of guys to the NFL. It's an NFL machine, especially a wide receiver and quarterback. And you have their best player, quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, is, he's pondering, do I make the jump to the NFL? So a lot of the decisions we're sharing in this episode surround about what's his future hold. What does next year hold? Does he sit out the remainder of this year because he is preparing to be an NFL quarterback? And you see a conversation, with Coach Kelly, because apparently he shares the same agent as Nussmeier, and he's chatting with the agent, and they're talking about, hey, he's got to make a decision. We got to really do the work and project really where he's going to be drafted. Because if it's later, third, fourth round, is it really worth it compared? And they don't say it, but he's referencing the NLM money that he'll make coming back to college football with LSU that may be more valuable than being a later round pick in the NFL. So that's the reality of what a head coach's life is at a program like LSU and what college football is. It's a business, right? The program might have taken a step back if Nussmeier leaves and they have to hit the transfer portal hard to find a replacement. And so that a lot of that conversation was surrounding his future. He eventually comes out and states he's coming back to LSU, which I'm sure was fine with Coach Kelly, and he can plan and load up for the 2025 season. So that was that. Auburn, and then again, another focus on Auburn going into an exciting game. Already done. Auburn's cooked. Their season is not going anywhere. They have a couple national championships in their history, but this was not going anywhere for Auburn. But at the same time, they're taking on Texas A&M let's make something out of this game. So they go take on Texas A&M. They wind up winning 43-41. 4 overtimes. Just some great footage of a great game. Drama. When you're watching the NCAA, overtime rules are different than the NFL. If you don't know, they play, each team starts on 20 or 25, whatever it is. And then eventually, after a while, goes to 2-point conversions until somebody misses. So just an interesting footage there for Auburn. And then you look at episode 5. It's called Football Family. And this is where we get into South Carolina again. Coach Beam's feeling the pressure, and then they start turning it on, right? They start winning. Things are going their way. They're getting win after win. So we're getting introduced that if they keep this going, they may be eligible for the college football playoff. Like, they feel good that they keep on this run with Coach Beam, that they can do some damage here, right? They can bring this program to where they want it to go. So there's this is kind of the turnaround episode where this team, this program is on the rise. They're dangerous, right? The momentum of college football, which is 12 games, yet has so many ups and downs and swings of emotion. They are on the upswing. And then we go to Vanderbilt, again, needs one more win to get into that bowl eligibility and play a bowl game that they desperately want. But at this point, they're hosting Texas. They're on the road to Texas, one of the big powerhouses in college football. Like I said, Texas just joined the SEC in 2024, along with Oklahoma. So we go into that game and the emotions and the prep that Vanderbilt is, putting together to face Texas. But at the end of the day, skill beats heart a lot of times, man. Texas is too much of a powerhouse, and they take care of business and knock off Vanderbilt. So you see the emotion there, knocking off Alabama a couple weeks earlier, but going into Texas and just could not live up to that hype and beat the Texas Longhorns. Now we go to episode 6, the second last episode of the series. We have Mississippi State and Ole Miss. So the focus here goes to a state rivalry. And I think this is I enjoyed this part of it, even though it was a very small portion of the 7-episode series. And you really get into Coach Jeff Lebby of the Mississippi State Bulldogs. He takes over this program in Mississippi State. They are struggling. He comes from Ole Miss, I think it was an offensive coordinator. He takes over the Mississippi State program. They're falling on hard times because they're on the rebuild. He's promoting that this is just the beginning. The brighter times will find us. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. This program is on the upswing. That's what he's selling. That doesn't mean the pressure's not on. And, Mississippi State Bulldogs, their season's done, right? They're not going anywhere. But when it comes to the end of the season, many of these teams take on their interstate rivalry, their longtime rival. And for them, that's the Ole Miss Rebels. So you get a lot of footage of some of the players going home. They're talking about what are your chances. You feel good about Ole Miss. And, you talk about, they're even talking about some of the family divisional divide on, supporting Mississippi State versus Ole Miss. The two differences. And it's called the Egg Bowl, by the way. The Egg Bowl, there's a trophy involved. So very, very important. And almost, again, Mississippi State season sucked. But with a win here against their interstate rivals, that could have gone a long way of making it a bit of a more of a success. That's how important this rivalry is. This is how important it is to each community to get at least this victory. This victory is absolutely huge. All right. So we go into that. We watch the prep. We watch Mississippi State go into Ole Miss, and, well, they lose. Okay? They lose. Ole Miss takes them out quite easily. And then, we get another scene of Coach Lebby talking about how it's his fault. But, keep your head chins up because the program is on the rise. So that's kind of what he's selling. And we'll see what happens going into 2025. And then we also have Texas A&M and Texas. These teams haven't met a while, but this is a huge rivalry despite not being haven't played in a lengthy period of time. You really get to focus on Texas A&M and Coach Mike Elko. He's a little more harsh, a little more veteran, a little more straightforward. Seems like his players like him, but he's talking to a couple boosters on the field. I think they're boosters, but they're A&M supporters. And you just feel the pressure of like this program's got to take that next leap, right? We all knew who Texas A&M is. It's the home of Johnny Manziel. And they're kind of known for, an upset here or there, but never really taking a run of what they expect, and that's a potential national championship run. And that's kind of what you feel of. This program's an upper echelon program, but just can't get over that hurdle of being taken seriously. And you can feel that pressure on head coach there. And, you get, again, more footage of players ahead of that game against Texas. You have their linebacker talking about how, Texas didn't recruit him. He had a chip on his shoulder a bit, but Texas A&M brought him in. You get to also find out about Texas A&M, and they have kind of a military connection. So it's kind of a unique school. I don't know if they're male cheerleaders, but they have male cheerleaders that are in overalls. I can't recall the full story on that, but you see, that tradition. They all show up at the stadium, and for the midnight yell or yelp or whatever it is, but just the massive support these programs have, and the many, they have a collie, it's a collie as their mascot. It's just insane. The traditions that you might find interesting by watching some of these episodes. So, and in that episode, Texas A&M can't get the job done. Texas kicks their ass. And we got episode 7, the final. The focus on the 12-game football, college football playoff. So new this season was the expansion of the football playoff format, where we now seen 12 teams across the NCAA football Division I teams have the possibility of competing for a championship, the largest tournament for the championship ever. And there's some automatic bids, but there's also a committee that will decide who will be in those slots for, the teams that don't win their conferences and don't get the automatic bids. So hopes for teams like South Carolina are on the committee. And also what's important is that based on the format of these 12 teams is that there's a bye. So there's a top 4 ranking that the committee provides, and those teams get home games. So it's very important that not only you make the playoffs, but you're hoping you get a benefit of a home game. So big decisions happening here. We're coming to the end of the season, and South Carolina is going into Clemson. So the thought here was if South Carolina could go into Clemson, walk in on the road, beat Clemson, that might sew up that spot in the college football playoff. They go in, we see the footage of them preparing, you give your pregame speech. Guys come out blaring. Lenora Sellers has a great game. The Gamecocks do what they needed to do on the road, get the victory. And then you find out that when it came to the committee, apparently they didn't do enough to make it. So the South Carolina Gamecocks get the shaft. There's not really an explanation to why they wouldn't qualify or why their opponents they did beat weren't good enough, why that win at the end of the year on the road wasn't solidifying a spot in the college football playoff. And you see a press conference, Coach Bean being like just disgusted, broken down, and just anger. So it just that's where college football kind of gets you, where there's 13-member committee that is deciding your fate. So whatever you did on the field may not be enough because somebody has an opinion that it might be a 7-6 opinion. 6 people might be in favor on the committee while 7 are not, or vice versa. You get the benefit of the doubt. So they got shafted. So that was a really eye-opener in how this structure works, and some of the teams that, get really just crushed. The programs take that step back and don't get that experience that they want to make a run at the college football championship. And then, at the end here, we also get a brief look at Tennessee getting a road game, which they were not happy about, in Ohio State to open up the college football playoff. Yeah, it's honestly they got steamrolled. Ohio State crushed them. So Tennessee's hopes were dashed, and hey, it happens. Just like they did, they walked into Vanderbilt, crushed Vanderbilt, and their hopes got dashed. In Ohio State, the eventual national champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes, and then we get quick footage in Kentucky about their program and their game against Louisville, their state rival. But the focus on Maxwell Harrison and Deion Walker. And Harrison is a cornerback that was drafted in the first round by the Buffalo Bills. And ironically enough, they talked about his friendship with Deion Walker, who was also picked in the 4th round about the Buffalo Bills. And what's interesting here is that Maxwell Harrison was, after getting drafted, the story comes out that he's being accused of, sexual assault that was eventually thrown out. And I'm wondering, geez, was that like a coincidence that he was a brief focal point at the end there? Or was that on purpose? Like, what was the goal? I'm trying to understand the motivation to that. Was there any reluctance to put him on film because of that? If the charges didn't get dropped, would they have cut that out before they released it? It's interesting why that storyline was brought there at such a small period. It wasn't like a journey for multiple episodes of him building up his draft capital to see if he could get drafted in the first round. It was odd. It seemed out of place. So there you have it. That's kind of where the 7 episodes of the SEC football any given Saturday. That's my take on it. So here, that's kind of my review. But wanting more, I felt there was probably more we could have learned about DJ Lagway of the Florida, Gators. He took over as starting quarterback. I think the Gators went on a bit of a run at the end of the year. I think it would have been Cool to see him become more comfortable in the offense and being able to expand what he could do with the playbook and get his comfort level. That's kind of where they started the storyline of, oh shit, I'm overwhelmed. Like I'm trying to, I got the pressure on me, and now, I'm getting it. Like, I'm ready to take this program to the next level. I think we could have seen more about that since Florida's such a big program. I want to see more about the transfer portal. I want more talk about the transfer portal. And, the transfer portal for the last few years has become significant in college football, college basketball, on the makeup of your teams and the promises of money paid out to these players to join these programs. So I would allow to see more discussion about the transfer portal strategy and or how it's impacted their programs. So there was more for me on that. NIL, name, image, and likeness, where these guys are getting paid for their image. There wasn't much talk about that, but they kind of, like I talked about with Garrett Nussmeier, the quarterback of the LSU, dancing around what income he would receive based on his draft position. Would it be better to stay in college versus jumping to the NFL and being a later round pick as an NFL quarterback? That's interesting. I would have liked to see more about how that impacts the game, and it does, and I think they purposely kept that out. And you know what? We want it, when I'm thinking SEC, I think Alabama, right? I think Alabama, Crimson Tide, is the main program that we probably wanted to see. And so that's kind of like, it would have been very interesting because Kalen DeBoer left Washington State to take over from Nick Saban last year for that Alabama job. And they kind of faded at the end there with being ranked number 1 and then dropped off. So that would have been something that I think would have been very interesting to kind of watch how he's taken over the program. But maybe unfair that, here you're taking over this massive, flagship program in the SEC, and you got cameras following you around, asking you questions about Nick Saban and replacing Nick Saban. Do you feel pressure about Nick Saban? Do you feel pressure when he shows up with College Game Day and he's on, campus, et cetera, et cetera? So maybe that's a good reason why they didn't focus on them. So season 2, my asks are to include, Alabama, Texas, and Georgia, 3 big programs that I think we want to see how, some of these facilities in the other places. I want to see some of the locker rooms and facilities at Alabama. That would be interesting to see. And more about the college football committee, the playoff committee. I kind of want to hear more discussion on how those decisions were made, and maybe, what was the mindset. And we're never going to get this. Let's just keep in mind, this information will never come out. And this is just a pie in the sky, what I would like to see. And I would love to see kind of, the discussion as the season went on, and where, the committee's thoughts on what teams, if they had to pick in week 7, who would make the college playoff versus maybe how it played out in week 9 and then finally week 12. And then, even dropping into South Carolina, why did their performance this season was not good enough to reach where they wanted to go, and that was a college football playoff. And that disappointing season for that, or that disappointing decision to leave them out to that program. So those are the things I wanted to see, what I think we want to see for season 2. And there you have it. The pleasure was all yours. The Overrated Experience review of SEC football any given Saturday is complete. Drop us some feedback at Overrated EXPER2. That's Overrated EXPER2. And share the episodes with anybody you know that might be interested or on the fence to spend the time to walk through those 7 episodes. It's a perfect series that you can stop and go. All right? You don't need to, binge watch it. You can watch it at your own pace. And I think you get you pretty pumped to kind of watch some of the games that are going to come up in NCAA football. And more to come with the Overrated Experience Sports and Sports Betting Podcast. When it relates to the NFL, I'm hoping to get some podcasts out there related to win totals, maybe even talk about survivor pools, and then we get to the weekly props, talking about prop totals, and then your week spreads and major bets we're going to put on. So join us, follow us, and we're going to win together, all right? So that's the Overrated Experience is over and out. Bye-bye.